Welcome to the Newsa-Cast YouTube channel. These Red Smith Banquet throwbacks are exclusive interviews of sports legends, powerful media personalities, and influential coaches. You won't find these anywhere else. Subscribe below and enjoy. All right, Tash, it is Red Smith Banquet throwback time. And we have a special one this week, a very appropriate one this week. We go back to 1999, and it's going to be just slightly different for us. We've become accustomed to releasing these on our YouTube channel and in video form and taking us back to all the different years of the banquet. Mm-hmm. However, in 1999, for some reason, the DVD disc that we have is a little bit scrambled, maybe a little bit damaged. I'm not sure, but we have fantastic audio, but no video this week, Tosh. But we wanted to get Peter King out there. He retired this past week from Sports Illustrated. Long time NFL writer. Really one of the most respected NFL writers. But we thought it was appropriate to have his speech from 1999. It was fantastic. That was a heck of a banquet. We had Paul Molitor and Bobby Rahal. We had all the sports represented that year, but we thought it was important to get Peter out there and let all the folks know that Peter King did come to Appleton in 1999.
Yeah, he's obviously an amazing amount of time, 20 some years at 29 years, 30 years at Sports Illustrated, and he was on Football Morning in America. He wrote on Pro Football Talk. He was a sports writer he was the football writer for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Right. And he was also on Football Night in America, NBC Sports' Sunday night NFL coverage. So, yeah, he's obviously an amazing career. And like you said, a fantastic speech at the Red Smith Sports Banquet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his whole life has been the NFL. I mean, we've all read him and have seen him on TV. I was reflecting back a little bit because we all got Sports Illustrated before, obviously before the internet. That's how we got our news, the newspapers and Sports Illustrated, and looked at the pictures, and Peter King was there. But, when the Packers started their run back in the 90s, when Holmgren arrived and Ron Wolf, back in 95, it was a little bit unprecedented back then, but Holmgren allowed Peter King full access to the to the team, to the meetings and all that. And he documented that and wrote about the 95 season. It was quite good. I'd recommend folks going back and reading his articles. But yeah, that was unusual for Holmgren, unusual for the Packers to allow a reporter full access, but they did for Peter King. And I guess it speaks to just how well respected he was and what a fine reporter and columnist he definitely was.
And, he has 5 books on football as well. And one little known fact, this goes back to 2005. The governor of New Jersey appointed King to a fact-finding task force in an attempt to end steroids and human growth hormone in high school athletics.
Oh, very nice.
So
very nice.
Yeah. So all kinds of stuff from Mr. Peter King. So
no, absolutely. So enjoy the audio. I mean, if you're listening to this in podcast form, you don't have to worry about it, but you find folks out there in YouTube land that are looking at Tosh and I right now. If you could do us a favor and hit like and subscribe, that would be huge. But also just enjoy the audio of Peter King and reminisce. Go take a look at our catalog, Tosh. We've got 30 some throwbacks now from past banquets, and they're all really, really good. And little flashbacks, a lot of humor. It's well worth your time.
Absolutely.
Peter King. At the age of 32, he became the youngest writer to be named a senior writer on the staff of Sports Illustrated. He has become one of the most widely read and respected writers in America on the nation's new pastime, pro football. He's written widely on the Packers in recent years, including an inside look at the Packers in 1995, when Coach Mike Holmgren allowed him unfettered access to the team for a game week during the regular season. He wrote another Sports Illustrated story about a bus ride across America with John Madden, which appeared in a collection of the magazine's best pro football stories in 1996. Peter King is the author of Sports Illustrated Inside the NFL. He is an NFL analyst for CNN and CNN Sports Illustrated cable network, appearing weekly on the Sunday morning CNN NFL preview show. He has won 4 writing awards. He's written 5 books, including Inside the Helmet, A Player's Eye View of the NFL, published by Simon & Schuster in 1993. Peter King lives in Montclair, New Jersey, with his wife Ann and their 2 daughters. Please welcome Peter King. Peter.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. And now you're all going to find out why the bear is here. Why is that bear here? Well, I just want to tell you what a great place you guys have. I am so honored to be here, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I've been here a few times over the years to cover pro football games, stayed in this hotel a few times, and when Mike Reese called and asked me to speak to the group tonight, the first thing I thought of is, you got the wrong guy. I sit out there, I take notes, and I listen to Paul Molitor, I listen to Bobby Rahal. I mean, I shouldn't be here. But Mike said, don't worry about it, just talk about the Packers and everything will be okay. I got a few of those stories. The first one of those is about 10 years old. When I first got to work for Sports Illustrated, they said that, every Sunday we want you to go to a game that's pretty interesting in your mind. So that first year I said, I've never been to a Packers-Bears game, and I'd really like to see what that's all about. So the Bears were staying right here in this hotel, and I called the Bears PR guy and said, can I get together maybe for an early dinner Saturday night with a couple of players? So they got me Ron Rivera and Jim Morrissey. We walked up College Avenue to Victoria's, and Jim Morrissey and Ron Rivera were looking around, and they said, isn't this place great? I mean, this is like Beaver Cleaver's hometown. But anyway, I followed the Bear buses the next day to Lambeau Field, and we got out on the highway to Green Bay. And it wasn't long before I saw one of the strangest sights I've ever seen. Sean, are you ready? I've called Sean up here. He's my assistant tonight, okay? Bobby Rahal's got David Letterman. I have Sean. And the strangest thing I've ever seen, we're driving along, there's 3 Bear buses, and I'm right behind them. And up in some backyard, on the right-hand side of the road, are 2 kids, and there's a giant oak tree. And there is one of the biggest stuffed animal bears that I've ever seen in my life. And it is hanging by its neck off a branch of this oak tree. And as I drive by, and the buses drive by, okay, they knew it was the Bear buses. It was 9:30 on Sunday morning or whatever. They knew it was the Bear buses. Kids have been told that they're coming. So as we're driving by, and I'm driving behind the buses, this kid starts hitting the bear with a baseball bat. Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead. Everybody's going to really get a kick. Go ahead. Belt it. He's nailing this bear. And it's the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. All right, that's enough. Anyway, that's when I learned about the Bear-Packer rivalry. Thanks, Sean. That's your exercise for the night. You can take your seat if you want to. I guess you can keep the bat, or maybe Paul will autograph it. Anyway, that was, of course, in some of the bad old days in Packer football, I guess. That was before the most interesting person that I've met in the 15 years I've covered the NFL got here. And I don't mean Jim McMahon. I didn't really know Brett Favre much before I asked Mike Holmgren if I could hang around his team for a week in 1995. And this was a pretty interesting week. Packers were 5-3. Minnesota was coming to town, big game, playing for the division lead. And as I hung around the team that week, I really got an interesting view, and I want to tell you a couple of stories. One of them appeared in the magazine when I wrote this story, but a couple of details I left out. On Monday, Holmgren called two young running backs into his office, Travis Jervey and LaShawn Johnson. And one thing I found out about Mike, he had a great pipeline to the locker room. I don't know whether the place was mic'd or whether he had a hidden camera and two-way glass, but I mean, it was really interesting that he knew what was going on before a lot of the players knew he knew. So he calls Travis Jervey and LaShawn Johnson into his office, and they say, "What do we do, Coach?" And he said, "You know what you did. You got to get rid of that lion." And they said, "What?" They were shocked. Mike Holmgren knew that Travis Jervey and LaShawn Johnson had bought for $5,500 a real lion. They bought it from an exotic animal dealer in Texas. They had it drugged, flown up here, went and picked it up at the Green Bay airport. They picked it up, and it was living on their living room couch. And before they could even try to tell Mike that we're getting this thing housebroken, Mike didn't want to hear anything of it. He said, "Listen, you get rid of that lion, or you're going to be suspended." So I don't know what they did with it, but apparently they got rid of it because they weren't suspended. So Mike finishes with them, they leave the office, and he's shaking his head, and he says to me, "You work your whole career to be a coach at the highest level of football. And you get there. You're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the place where Lombardi coached. And you got the biggest game maybe you've ever had. We're playing for the division lead, playing the Minnesota Vikings, putting together the game plan. And I got to take 20 minutes out of my life to tell two guys on the team they can't have a lion." I don't know, I have a feeling that Ray Rhodes is probably not going to have many lion problems. I think Travis Jervey knows that maybe an iguana, Gila monster, that'll be about it for him. Brett Favre, funny guy. His quarterback coach, Steve Mariucci, you might have heard of him. One night, he and his wife Gail had just had a baby. And that was the week I was there. So I was over his house one night, and Favre says, "Hey, come on, I want to go see this baby. Me and Deanna, his fiance, now wife, have a gift for the baby." Baby was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 weeks old. So we go over the house, and Favre, as if on cue, baby was awake. Favre lifts up the baby. And I had told Favre he says, "You got any good jokes?" And I don't have any good jokes. I only have bad ones. But anyway, I told him this joke, and so he told the baby this joke. And he says, I forget what the kid's name is, but let's call her Joanne. I don't think it's Joanne. What is it, Jeff? Brielle, I'm sorry. Brielle, got a good joke for you. Horse walks into a bar. Bartender says, "Hey, why the long face?" Brielle didn't get it. And for a year or so, every time I would see him, he would say, "You got a good joke?" And so I stole this joke from a sports writer in Detroit, Mike O'Hara, and I saw him one time. I said, "You got to give me another joke, because every time I see Favre, he wants one." So the next time I saw Favre, I said, "Hey, sandwich walks into a bar. Bartender says, 'I'm sorry, we don't serve food here.'" Favre loved that. He went telling John Madden and everybody. He thought that was a great joke. That week, Mike Holmgren, I guess once every month or so, I don't know, Lee Remmel and Jeff would know this, but every once in a while he has the players sign footballs to give to charity. And so, I'm in the locker room watching him do this, and all the guys are kind of giving Favre a lot of guff. And I didn't know what they were talking about. So Holmgren walks into the locker room and he says, "I'm sick and tired of having some charity from Oshkosh call me back and say, 'Who is this John Doe?' And who's Jay Leno? Or we got an autographed ball with Ronald Reagan's name on it. What are you doing?" And so Mike had to come in the locker room, and again, a big game week, boy, they were concentrating on the Vikings this week. We got to stop John Randall. And Mike Holmgren has to walk in and point a finger at Favre and say, "Stop fooling around with these balls, sign your own name." And the one name that Favre always thought was great, that he thought he got away with because Mike didn't know it, he signed Wayne Newton once. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I always wanted to be Wayne Newton. I like the way he dresses." I remember after that game going over to Favre's house, and he threw 5 touchdown passes. He was great. But to me, this is the essence of Brett Favre. And this is the same year he had his Vicodin problem. I'm pretty ashamed to say I had no idea that it was going on, even though I was there all week. But after that game, he throws 5 touchdown passes. They win a thrilling game. And I said, "How do you feel?" He said, "My shoulder hurts, both knees hurt. Somebody stepped on my hand. I feel like my elbow is dislocated. But you know what? Wasn't that great out there today?" And, you know, that's just the kind of guy he is. I think he's going to play till something falls off. And I think that probably someday when they build some statues about this era in Packer history, that somebody ought to build one for Ron Wolf for trading for this guy a few years ago. I think one of the reasons that I started to hang around with Favre a little bit is because he loves oldies. And one day we got in his car after doing something, and he put on an oldies CD. And he thought that it was the greatest thing in the world that I knew every word to Crimson and Clover by Tommy James and the Shondells. So every time we'd go out, we'd have these little contests. You know, I would have to sing a song, or he would have to sing one to see. And I remember, it wasn't this past year, it was 1997. We were out one time, and he put one on, and I got to admit, I must have been in my classical music phase, you know, my 10-minute classical music phase about 15 years ago. But he puts on this song called Kung Fu Fighting. And he knows every word, every single word. And he's singing it and having the time of his life. And he was so happy because he's such a competitive guy that if he can beat you at singing an oldie, he's thrilled. He thinks that's the greatest thing in the world. One other time, again, in I think it was 97 season, I found out how competitive he was. He had his whole family come in. I don't remember. I think it was before the playoff game, before they went to San Francisco, so the wild card game or whatever the divisional game was. And we'd eaten at the Green Bay Country Club, and I wasn't that familiar with the roads, but I knew him okay. I had driven one car. He drove his big SUV. And there was about 12 people, so we kind of crowded into the cars afterwards. And I made sure that I got in my car first because Favre was always bragging about what a great driver he was. And I rolled down the window, and Irvin Favre, Brett's father, is sitting in the seat next to me. And I rolled down the window and I said, "Beat you home." You know, that's real mature for me, a 40-year-old father at 2. Beat you home. And so Favre didn't say anything, and I burned rubber going out of the parking lot. And Brett's father said, "You ain't beating him home. He won't let you." And I said, "Well, we'll see." So I'm driving Bobby Rahall's speed on the streets of Green Bay, and we get to this intersection. It's 300 yards from his house, and we're stopped at a stoplight. And from the total opposite direction, tooling along at 34 miles an hour, here comes Brett Favre. And I could see he was smiling widely because he knew what I was trying to do. So we get home, get to his house. He's closing the garage door. And he waves to me, and I said, "You blankety blank," and he said, "Never in doubt." Now, I've been told by Mike Reese that I can tell you one slightly odoriferous story about Brett Favre. And if there are any women or children here who are offended by the explanation of gas passing, that wonderful male ritual of locker rooms, I suggest you leave right now because it's going to get pretty smelly in here in a minute. Well, I think everybody here knows Lee Remmel, longtime Packer publicist, and a truly good guy, one of the greatest guys in the NFL I deal with. Anyway, for some reason, Favre loves Lee Remmel, and he takes great delight in doing funny things to Lee Remmel. So one day, I should start by saying that the Packer team buses are usually a pretty serious place. You know, before a game when Mike Holmgren wanted everyone thinking about football, I'm sure Ray will be the same. It wasn't a place that was particularly jovial. So anyway, a couple of years ago, they're on their way to Soldier Field before a game, and Favre is all excited because someone has given him a gift of a remote control fart machine. You know, I never knew these things existed either. Anyway, Favre goes on the team bus. Now, this is Favre's story. It's not mine, so I can't be sued for this. Favre places the remote control gas machine beneath Lee Remmel's seat. He sits on the aisle a few rows back, inching through Chicago traffic, getting ready to play the Monsters of the Midway. All of a sudden, everybody kind of looks over at Lee Remmel like, didn't know Lee had that problem. And the great thing about this machine, now according to Favre, is that it had 4 different gas emissions on it. It wasn't just the same one. So about 10 seconds pass, and all of a sudden, and of course, Brett is waiting for Mike Holmgren to turn around and look at Lee and ask him to take a Tums. But there was no turning around. So anyway, third time he goes, finally Holmgren turns around, and Brett thinks he's gone far enough because Brett at least knows when to stop. That's the end of the story. It's not a great one, but I just wanted to tell you that that's just the kind of guy he is. Moral of the story is, where Brett Favre is, it's always interesting. Now I'd like to address another subject near and dear to your hearts. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands here because you're all nice people. But I think if I gave you all sodium pentothal, you would admit to just a slight thought or two that you thought Ron Wolf was a little touched in the head when he hired Ray Rhodes. Coming off a 3-13 season, fired by the worst team in the NFC. And here he is to coach your Green Bay Packers. Well, and I have heard I've heard the sentiment expressed locally by some fans and some media, and I read the internet. And I have heard a lot of people say that, what in the world is Ron doing? This guy, he lost. You know, go out and get a winner. I want to explain to you a couple of things because I've known Ray for a while. If the players in the NFL, if the players on your team don't have a little bit of fear of you, you're not going to succeed. And players who play for Ray Rhodes are going to have some fear of him. Always have, always will. And the other thing about Ray that I think is really important to realize is the environment he's coming from. Came from Philadelphia, 1995. In the worst non-trade in NFL history, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeff Lurie, haggles over a few bucks and doesn't give Mark Brunell the signing bonus that he was supposed to give him. And so Mark Brunell, after having the whole deal done, he's going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Mark Brunell ends up in Jacksonville. And Ray ends up with a collection of Detmers. And there's nothing wrong with the collection of Detmers. But the collection of Detmers are backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And Jeff Lurie said, Ray, you know what? You can win with these guys. And Ray is nodding his head and thinking inside. He said, no, I can't. The one other thing about the Eagles that's particularly noteworthy is that, with all due apologies to my baseball friends on the dais, the Philadelphia Eagles became the Brewers and Twins of the NFL last year. Spent the least amount of money of the 30 franchises in the NFL in free agent signing bonuses. So I guess what I'm trying to point out is that's kind of the realistic side of why what happened to Ray Rhodes happened to Ray Rhodes. And I want to tell you a couple of things now about Ray Rhodes, the person. In 1996, I spent a few days in Philadelphia writing a story on Ray Rhodes, which never appeared in the magazine. The reason it didn't is you write something, and then you're totally beholden to what happens that Sunday. And the week I wrote this story, the Eagles lost the following Sunday, so it went in the Netherland of sports stories at Sports Illustrated. Never ran. And I was flipping through some of my notes from that story, and there were a couple of stories that I thought you'd like to hear, and if you don't mind, I'm going to just read them verbatim. First one. Ray Rhodes is driving home after a bitter September Monday night loss to Dallas in early 1996. He's not taking it well because he has never taken losing well. As a long-shot draftee of the Giants, he once told a roommate, the only way they're getting me to leave New York is in a pine box. So on this trip home, his wife Carmen and daughter Raven were in the car with him. Raven was driving him nuts with suggestions about what he should have done differently that night, even though Mom keeps shushing her. Rhodes is so mad he can't see straight. And when they get home, he holds the door for his wife and daughter and wordlessly turns to walk back to the car. Where are you going? His wife says. To the office, Rhodes says. You can't go back to the office. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, she says. Too late. She was talking to the car as it backed out of the driveway. Here's a second story. In 1967, when schools in Texas were finally being integrated, Rhodes moved from all-black Dunbar High to previously all-white Mejia High. After Rhodes' decision was announced, some of the friendlier Texans in the neighborhood burned a cross on his family's lawn. And one day before a big game against a team from Waco, Rhodes picked up the phone in his house and heard a voice say, if you score a touchdown tomorrow, we're going to shoot you. Ray's family was upset. Friends told him not to play. He told them, you can't let warped people control your life. And his coach, Bob McQueen, finishes the story. Oh, Raymond was really terrified, all right, he said with a sad chuckle. He went out and played the game of his life, scored 3 or 4 touchdowns, don't remember which, but we won. Now McQueen is left to ponder a question about why Rhodes rose from this environment to have one of the 30 most important jobs in the biggest sport in the world. Why is Raymond Rhodes so successful, he says? Because he was never afraid, and I'm sure he still isn't, to endure the loneliness of being a leader. And that's one of the reasons why I think Ray Rhodes is a hell of a choice to coach the Green Bay Packers. I'm sort of out of stories now, except for one other quick one. My daughter Mary Beth is 13 years old and was a pretty good windmill pitcher on her softball team back home in New Jersey. I coached the team. So last year, before our season started, we'd had a good year in 97, but 13 of the 16 girls we had on the team were too old. They were no longer 12 and under. They had to go up to the 14 and under team. So it was basically going to be Mary Beth and a cast of pretty much new characters. So I was out in Denver last year doing a story on the Broncos coming back after winning the Super Bowl, and I interviewed Mike Shanahan. At the end of the interview, I said, Mike, can I ask you a personal question? He said, yeah. I said, coaching my daughter's softball team, we've lost almost everybody. We really might stink. And I need your advice. You have any advice for me to go back and to try to at least be respectable? I mean, we're not going to win a lot of games, but to be respectable. And he thought for a while and he said, Peter, the first year I got to Denver, everybody thought the sky was falling. So I sat back and I said, you know what? We're going to concentrate and do one great thing on each side of the football to hold the fort. We're going to throw the ball great because we got a great quarterback. And somehow, some way, I'm going to scotch tape a run defense together. And so in the time that training camp and everything, every day, he'd work harder than anything offensively on the passing game. And then he'd work harder than anything defensively, stopping the run. So he said, you know, we had a pretty good year. We weren't great, but, you know, it held the fort, and it got us to the next year. And so he said, you know, what I would advise you to do is go do two things. Just look at your kids, no matter what level of talent they are. There's got to be a couple of things that they can do well. So I got on the plane and I flew home and I said, you know, that's really, really good advice. Because in girls softball at a young age, you know, sometimes that everybody's throwing the ball around the diamond and it's just chaos out there. So we go home, or I go home, and I pick the team. Every day, I decide that we've got 4 kids who are pretty good. And I said, you know what, I'm going to put them at all the infield positions. And I'll put Mary Beth at pitcher. And we have an okay catcher, not a good arm, but she can stop it. And I said, you know, we're going to work at this. So every day, 30 minutes at practice, infield practice. Third baseman, 50 ground balls. I had 2 assistant coaches. And they'd hit 50 ground balls to the third baseman, all thrown to first. And then the shortstop would come in, 50 ground balls, all thrown to first. So we were okay there. Every day, 30 minutes bunting. And that was tough to make it fun for kids. But anyway, we did it, 30 minutes bunting. So anyway, of course we start the season 0-2. And our third game is against the first place team in the league, Montvale. Come to our town, they got really nice uniforms. And our kids are over looking at them, and I have t-shirts with Montclair on the front, you know. And so Montvale comes in, and I don't want our kids to watch them during warm-ups because they're pretty good. But anyway, 5th inning, they're up 10-4. It's not looking good for the hometown 11 or 10 or whatever we were. And we kind of battle back a little bit, and we get close, and finally, in the 6th inning of a 7-inning game, we tie it up. Mary Beth pitches a scoreless 7th. Bottom of the 7th, we get up, last at bat. First 2 batters go out. Next 3 batters walk, as you often see in fast-pitch softball. Then on deck, I look over, and there is Amy Demaray. Amy Demaray is 10 years old. She is built like a dinner fork. And she is scared out of her wits. This is her 3rd game ever of fast-pitch softball. And she's the kid who, I've got her on the team because I love her attitude. She's great. But you know what? She's just a little bit shy in the talent area. But, you know, I love her. She's a good kid. And so the crowd is kind of going nuts. It's like the Metrodome in Montclair, New Jersey. And she says, I go up to her because I can see she is shaking. She is shaking. And I kneel down to her and she says, Mr. King, I am so scared. And I said, Amy, don't be scared. You're going to win the game for us. She said, no, I'm not. I'm scared. I said, no, here's what you're going to do. Look out on the field. Look where the pitcher is. Look where the first baseman is. See the second baseman? The second baseman's an idiot. The second baseman is playing back, really far back, for some ridiculous reason. And you're small. Amy, and I'm serious about this, weighs 48 pounds. And I said, you know what you're going to do on the first pitch? You're going to square around, and you're going to bunt the ball just like Paul Molitor would, only I didn't say that. And you're going to bunt the ball just like Paul Molitor would between first and pitcher. She said, I can't do that. I've never done that in a game. And I said, Amy, you've done it. You have 20 bunts every day in practice, 10 sacrifice, 10 for a hit. Just square around like a sacrifice bunt, and you're going to do it. So anyway, she goes up to the plate. She's got these big wire frame glasses. None of the helmets on the team fit her. They're all too big. She's got to wear a hat, and she kind of puts her blonde ponytail back. She puts her helmet on, goes up to the plate. Doesn't even take a practice swing, doesn't do anything. She just goes up there, and this kid is scared out of her wits. First pitch comes in. And it must have been reaction. It must have just been, if I don't do it, somebody's going to be mad at me. I don't know what it was. But Amy Demarais laid down a bunt that Maury Wills would have been proud of. This bunt just went out about 25 feet between first and the pitcher's mound and just died. Amy could have gone to second. But anyway, the winning run scores. The crowd is going nuts. Amy is just beaming. Everybody goes out, and it's just like in football where they pile on Robert Brooks and he like dies in the end zone. And it's you know, she's just buried at the bottom of this pile. And I look over, and Amy Demarais' mother is sobbing because it's the greatest moment of her kid's life. And she was so happy. The moral of that story, Mike Shanahan knows what he's talking about, and I'm picking Denver in the Super Bowl. I just want to thank everybody here for inviting me and making me part of a wonderful night. This has been one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done as a sports writer. And I just want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here tonight. Thanks.
Peter King, thank you.
Please subscribe to this channel, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that notification bell so you get notified when we post another great episode or interview. Download the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for your support.